there's something to this idea of getting what we need, getting what we think we want, and then suddenly discovering that gratitude sometimes is more about recognizing what we have even in our most difficult moments. I said that thing about in the story that there's that idea that when the villagers said, well, go on and get killed, go ahead and get eaten, and then you won't have to worry about anything anymore. But there's the secret, there's the answer right there, right? In that statement. Sometimes the things we create have become so much a part of the creative process of how bad something is that we can't even connect with how simple the problem could be to solve, right? So I want to think about what if gratitude is less about the things about being thankful. Now, guaranteed, that can make you feel better in a given moment, just remembering that you got stuff, just remembering that you got goodness in your life, just remembering that there's peace in your presence when things are feeling overwhelming. That can be helpful. Just being grateful in a night terror, that you're grateful you're standing on the ground, just being reminded of that with gratitude can be helpful. But I think what Paul's talking about here is something much more amazing, which you'll find in all of the spiritual traditions around the world, which we call perennial wisdom, right? That's that thread that you see in all the traditions around the world that holds to something central in all of them. It's about this larger picture of interconnectedness. And gratitude is a part of that, how we live out of that sense of gratitude that transforms even the most difficult, problematic moments and experiences. That can address the gravity of a moment in a way that brings peace, that brings life, and even delight in those moments. And so Paul says, in all things, give thanks. What a strange thing to say, because there's a lot of stuff I don't want to be thankful for, right? There's a lot of people I don't want to like or be thankful for. But what Paul's saying, and what I think is what we try to understand in here as part of one of our movements, is this receptivity. As we are open, as we are receptive, as we are like Rumi in that wonderful poem, The Guest House, this life is like a guest house. Sometimes a stranger comes to the door, a difficulty, a joy, a depression, a meanness, something unexpected. But when we invite it in, welcome it all, then we sometimes find it has something for us to learn, something that transforms those moments. Paul says it in this way, in all things, give thanks, because that's the way of God in Christ. That's the way of life. So gravity holds us down, right? We understand about gravity. I didn't know this about gravity. It's Einstein's theory of relativity. Some of you are scientists. I didn't know this. We haven't really proven it yet, right? We've got close. We can't really see gravity waves, but we come close. There's some people in the last 5 years that thought they've seen it off in the distance in a supernova somewhere, but they really can't prove gravity. And yet we know it's there. We see spiraling things happen. We see the Earth spinning around its axis. We see this circling around the sun. We know that gravity is pulling all of these things circling and spinning, even solar systems spinning around, and some of them colliding at some point. And we know that it spins us around, and inevitably, even we will be caught up in some cataclysmic collision as we collide with someone else, some other solar system, in 100 billion years or so from now. But I think that what we don't sometimes think about is the gravity of our situations. We don't recognize how we are being pulled into something until it's too late, right? We don't see that when we find ourselves spinning around an old familiar pattern in our relationship, an old familiar pattern with a coworker, an old familiar pattern with a child, one of our kids. We find ourselves or in our own depression, we find ourselves spinning around like gravity into these moments that we find ourselves drawn in until it becomes sort of like the Big Bang. We're not sure, though, what's going to happen. But I want to suggest that gratitude, practicing gratitude in those moments. In fact, before those moments, as we learn to wake up, before those moments can actually free us from the gravity of the situation. I'm not talking about the daily journal stuff. I'm talking about the original understanding of the word gratitude, which actually in its root word meant to favor something. Can you imagine that? You remember where Jesus says, love your neighbor, pray for your enemies, love those who persecute you? Can you imagine favoring something you don't want to deal with? Can you imagine favoring something you don't like or someone that you find difficult, caustic, poisonous, Can you imagine yourself being grateful in those moments? So if you look at the word appreciative, because I like to play with those two words, gratitude and appreciative, they actually overlap in meaning, and the word appreciative literally means to wake up and move towards what is precious. Gratitude, to favor. Appreciation, to wake up and move towards something. It's as if practicing gratitude is a type of leaning in towards being truly present, a practice that re-engages us to be more alive in those moments that are difficult than to be reactive, to somehow see that moment as precious. That's the weird thing, right? That's the difficulty. You're asking me to say this moment is something that's good, that I've already determined it's bad. I know what's coming. I know what's happening. Mark Nepo, the poet, some of you are readers of Mark Nepo, you're fans of Mark Nepo. He wrote, "Gratitude is the heart of reciprocity. It's the atom of relationship." I like that idea. Gratitude is the atom of relationship. Sometimes our gratitude is too often limited just to what feels good to us, what we like, what we would rather have, what we're thankful for, than the mysterious stuff, than the curiosity that sometimes even the worst possible things invite us to rethink, or those things that seem insignificant. Can you be grateful for the pandemic? Sounds completely ridiculous. Can you be grateful for the disease that we have, or the trouble that we've had? Can we be grateful for the depression? Doesn't make any sense, right? I get that. I want to suggest something, though. Einstein said one of my favorite phrases that I have up on my board in my office. I sometimes should carry it around with me in my car because sometimes that's when my kids get in the car, and I forget, and I'm suddenly spiraling into a gravity situation. Einstein said, "We can't solve problems by the same kind of thinking that got us into the problem." Right? We can't solve problems with the same kind of thinking that created the problem to begin with. Here's how Pema Chodron, the Zen Buddhist writer, says it. She says, "Fear is a natural reaction to moving closer to the truth of a thing." Fear is the natural reaction. Kid moving up the mountain, the villagers who wouldn't even get any closer. Sometimes our reaction, which has already put up a wall of defense before we can even see what's there. Fear is a natural reaction to moving closer to the truth. But if we open our hearts, anyone, including the people who drive us crazy, can be our teacher. So, I'm going to give you a personal example. And I've talked to my son, actually, because I mentioned that I'd probably use this illustration. Now, y'all, I preach at you all the time, right? Well, I don't preach at you. I preach. You listen if I'm lucky. I think most of you are listening. But I preach a lot, right? I go home and Linda says, "Did you hear your words today?" And I said, "Well, I think I did." She said, No. Did you hear the words you were saying today? Right? I mean, the truth is right, often you'll hear a preacher, a writer writes about who they are, where they are, what's going on. They write out of experience. A preacher's preaching out of what's going on. Right? I mess it up all the time. I screw up so often. It's embarrassing. I embarrass myself. I walk off humiliated and ashamed. Happened yesterday. My son, my younger son, our son, he had his car, the engine blew up earlier in the week. Just one more thing, right? It was a busy week. It was a crazy week. It was a hectic week. All sorts of other things happening. And then Dad, car blew up. I love how it starts off, right? You remember this with your old adult children, maybe when they were younger even. "Dad, I don't want you to get mad." Right? Already my heart's racing, right? Already my breath's shortening. Already I've got the word. I already know what's coming. I've already defined the moment. Gravity's pulling me in. He says, the car engine blew up. I'm out here on Highway 30 out at Altamira, whatever, way out, west side, and can you come get me? So I come and get him. The next couple of days is involved in how to get the SUV to a place, Can't be repaired. The engine's destroyed. $2,500 repair. We'll look at new cars. But you can just imagine at this point, the spiraling has already created this supernova, this reality that didn't need to be there, right? But I've already determined it. We've already experienced it. We're already reacting to it. And in the middle of that, so we finally find this car. Now, the first time we found a car, I said, no way, this is a stupid idea. Here I am taking charge of things. Turns out it was a stupid idea. We didn't end up going for it. It was down in Waco, and thankfully it didn't pan out like that very day. But then yesterday, people, I got to confess, I lost it. I just lost it in the car. It started raining. We were about to head out. One thing after another started to fall apart as we were going to head out to Granbury to find this perfect truck. It was an older truck, but I mean, it's a workhorse. If you all know an F-150, a Ford F-150, this was a 1989 Ford F-150. This car had so much potential. And even my oldest son and even our friends who are mechanics would say, like, dude, that's an awesome truck. You know, that thing, if it's working, that thing. And I said, that's the key. Is it working? Well, sure, it says it's working. The description. Anyway, I'm doubting. I've got anger. I've got frustration. I've put up the wall of defense. I'm losing it right and left. That helps him because, he just, you've argued with people. It's a wonderful thing, right? It just calms you right down. Maybe it does if you know how to practice gratitude. But see, I'd forgotten all about that. I'd forgotten all about the redemptive moments that I always talk about. I'd forgotten all about the possibilities that we never can see, that if we just lay back, we'd already realize the problem is solved. We just fight it. The villagers didn't want to deal with it. They just fought it. It was already solved. But I fought it, so we drove out there. We were quiet, frustrated, somewhat ashamed, but defensive. We're not going to be ashamed because I was right. He was right. It starts raining. It started raining yesterday afternoon. You remember that? Well, the closer we got to Granbury, the darker it got, the heavier the rain got, and I thought, well, this is just getting better and better. We're going to be looking at a car in the middle of the rain, checking out its engine, laying down. I looked over at my son, and I said, you're getting wet today. Of course, I knew I was going to be the one that would get wet. We got out there, and of course, we looked at the truck. It was at this. We pulled into a grocery store parking lot. We tried to pull under one of these little gas station things that they have there. Of course, we were just getting soaked. The guy gets out of the car. It's a character, friends. It is literally a character out of your most ridiculous Western novel or Western movie or whatever. This guy is, the shirt's unbuttoned. There's beer cans rolling out from underneath the front seat of the car. It's got rust on the side of it. How come that didn't show up in the pictures? It's got one tire that's smaller than the other three tires. I look at him and I said, I'm being friendly. My son Matthew's doing this. He's already backing up away from the car like, I didn't want this, And so I said, why does it have a different tire up front? He said, yeah, I looked down there. I realized I didn't even put tires on the front of it yet. So I put on whatever I had in the yard. And so he put those tires on it and drove it out there. I mean, it was getting bad to worse and stuff, but it was just getting funny. My son looked in the back for the car seat that had the bench, it had a bench back seat, to this truck, and it wasn't even big enough to put a car seat back there. And then we noticed the front seats don't stop. I mean, they don't stick. They just go back and forth. The guy was like, at this point we had the engine open. The guy realized this is looking kind of ridiculous on all sides of it. We're just getting soaked. And he looks over and he says, he's trying to make it sound good. I said, where does this hose that's just sitting out here in the middle of the engine, just kind of open? He said, where does it go? He says, I think that blows air out of the engine. All right, that blows air out. And I said, yeah, I've heard of that before. And I said, so does it start up? And he says, yeah, I put a new starter in it just the last month or last week. And I said, all right. So we get in the car, we start, it starts rough. But then we go ahead and we're going to drive it down the road, see if this thing, now it sounds awesome, right? It's got a nice big noise. The kind of noise that sounds like your muffler isn't attached to the manifold anymore. And so the manifold is just blowing out, Anyway, so we go down the road and we go up the hill and turn around and start to come down. And as we do, I'm accelerating and the car's slowing down. The truck's slowing down. As we come down the hill, the rain's coming in heavier, and the car's rolling to a stop. And about 3 blocks to go to the gas station, I rolled it across the intersection. Thank God the light was green, and it rolls to the edge of the drive into the gas station. The guy comes walking over in the rain. There's this other guy at a truck who's got his, getting gas. He looks over at us, and he's kind of like shaking his head. And I get out of the car, stand in the rain. He says, what happened? I said, well, I don't know. It won't start. Maybe I put the wrong starter in that thing. We jumped the car from the other guy with his truck who's looking at us. And I look at my son, and he's just shaking his head and kind of laughing, and I'm laughing with him. And then we pull the cables from... Now, friends, this is what happened. We pull the cables. The guy starts the truck. We pull the cables. I shut the hood. He slams it in reverse and heads off down the road and disappears. My son and I are looking at each other in the rain, and we just start laughing. We get in the car, and I looked at him and I said, I'm sorry. I really should have seen this. Not just that I figured it would be bad, but that it wasn't worth fighting over. We know how it's going to end. It's either going to end great or it's going to end with a story. They always end with stories. We either have a story that's redemptive to tell of the moment we never thought we'd get through, or we have something we didn't expect. It's even wonderful, right? That's gratitude. Gratitude is being able to look at the moments that are difficult and to be able to say in those moments, there's a larger story here. I just didn't see it. I'm not seeing it yet, but I know that there's a larger story. There always is. So we enter moments with more expectation and gratitude, even the difficult moments, even the difficult people, because we know that even that guy in the truck, he has a story. Who knows what his story is? Now, as we experienced it, it was kind of fun, but he went home kind of embarrassed and probably frustrated. But he has another story going on, too, that might be filled with pain. I don't know. But we know we all have stories that we don't see. We can't see if we keep approaching it with gravity, right? If we keep approaching it with the gravity of the situation rather than the possibility of the situation. That's what gratitude is. It's this opportunity to move into situations with grace. I want to finish with a quote here that's one of my favorite. Hannah Arendt. She says, sometimes in order to solve the problem, we have to do the hard work to find out how to do the hard work, right? Sometimes we have to take a breath, like looking up at the moon. We have to stop. We have to see just as a moment if we can breathe into this moment and realize, I'm not seeing this, but this is going to be great. I know it sounds stupid. I know it sounds impossible. I know the way that which Mick Jagger says it is he says, we can't always get what we want. But sometimes, if we try hard, we're going to get what we need. The way that Apostle Paul says it is always find the way to be at peace first, and then give thanks in all things. That's how we invite the redemptive moments to surprise us. Amen.